Okay, guys, so.
Alberta disappeared too.
Down in the end in darkness.
Alberta is
Right. You also have the option, guys, to share to your Facebook as well if you want to.
Where's that option, James?
At the bottom right hand, it should be there.
Oi, I'm not that digitally savvy.
Okay.
I'm using my phone.
Okay. Don't worry.
You all want us to turn off our mics when we're not speaking?
Michele will have to help us here.
I'm not seeing that to share to our.
No, neither am I.
No, so we don't seem to have that option.
You all want us to turn off our mics when we're not speaking, or?
We can do that.
Yes,
yeah, that would help.
Yeah.
I think we're on.
Are we?
Okay. Yeah, so we have about 19 participants already. All right. Just make sure.
What is the link, Mr. Adjodha?
It will be on Facebook under Wavemaker Productions.
Wavemaker Production.
Yeah, and also on YouTube.
That's James' company. Well, James is a director, I should say.
All right. So let me just, Alberta, do you want to just go ahead with the intros while I pull up these videos? So.
What you said, James? Sorry.
I said, do you want to go ahead with the intros while I pull up these videos?
I think since we're a few minutes behind, so perhaps we can start with the intro. Let me just, yeah, we can start with the intros. So I'll start with the welcome, and you would introduce the speakers, and we'll go from there. I sent you the pic. Okay. Got it?
Because I'm still trying to get this online.
James,
yeah,
it's not online yet.
No, not as yet.
All right, hold on, let me just think it. Okay. Okay. Sending data, should be there now.
Perfect, James. Thank you.
All right. Yeah.
Is there now?
Yep.
Yep, should be there now.
Yes,
yeah.
We're ready to go.
Okay, so.
Check this out. So I can say. Get it and then shoot off mine.
All right, just trying to pull up the Instagram one.
Get it already? To leave it on. Michele. Are you on?
We ready to go, James?
I'm just trying to pull up the Instagram one. So if you want to start off, you can go ahead.
Okay, no problem. Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to this OECS Sustainable Development Movement virtual event hosted by your two OECS ambassadors from St. Lucia, myself, Alberta Richelieu. I'm an attorney at law by profession, and Mr. James Adjodha, who is an entrepreneur. We're really excited to host this event today, and it's under the theme, Keeping Strides with the Future, Work, Investment, and Development. And of course, we have four dynamic speakers present today, Dr. Claudius Preville, Dr. Remy, Mr. Rayneau Gajadhar, and Miss Michele Marius. I will pass on to James, who will now introduce our four speakers and give us an idea of who we will be speaking to today. James, we're passing it on to you now.
Okay. So again, a pleasant good evening to everyone. As you can see on our panel this evening, we're going to allow everybody to basically introduce themselves. So we have Dr. Remy here with us. We also have Mr. Rayneau Gajadhar, Dr. Claudius Preville, and also the doctor as well, Michele Marius of ICT Pulse. All right, so a very warm welcome to everybody. Thank you for joining us. Maybe briefly, each and every one of you could just introduce yourself. Let's start with Ms. Remy, Dr. Remy. Ladies first.
Well, hi, thank you to both of you for the warm invitation and introductions, and to my fellow panelists. It's a pleasure to share the screen with you, not the podium. So my name is Remy. I'm a St. Lucia national. I've lived outside of St. Lucia, I would say, for most of my professional life. I am by training an international trade litigator and policy advisor. I worked for a good portion of my early life at the WTO, the World Trade Organization in Geneva, where I worked with judges advising them on issues of trade law and meandering through the various trade agreements to which WTO members are party. And then I moved into the same type of work, but more from a private sector perspective, working with a law firm, an international law firm in Geneva and Washington. And about 2 or 3 years ago, I decided to come back to the Caribbean, and I'm now housed at the University of the West Indies, Cave Hill campus, where I am Deputy Director at the Shridath Ramphal Center for International Trade, Law, Policy, and Services. It's a mouthful, we call it the SRC. I know Alberta did her master's there. You know, we do training of students in a master's in trade policy, but we also are moving the center much more into the direction of research, research in international law and international policy. So thank you again for the invitation. I'm really pleased to be here today.
Thank you, Genevieve. And Dr. Preville? I think your mic is on mute.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mr. Adjodha and Alberta. Okay, good night, panelists. My name is Claudius Preville. I am currently Managing Director at Preville and Associates Consulting Group. I am an economist by training, and Genevieve and I actually worked together for some time at a small agency called the Caribbean Regional Negotiating Machinery, where we were responsible for negotiating a trade agreement between the European Union and the CARIFORUM states. Since that assignment, I moved on to international private consulting. I work extensively on contracts for the European Union, pretty much in the entire ACP. I've worked in the Pacific, I've worked in Africa, I've worked throughout CARICOM. I have particular interest in trade policy, but I work also on services policies, I work on export strategies, I work on a number of other policy areas. And I've done work as well in the private sector, advising mostly as management consultant of late. I find this theme very interesting and exciting. I think it's something that we have to give some more thought to, the future of work. In fact, the current aspects of work as well as the future of work, something we have to give some serious thought to. I look forward to exchanging my own views with you on this and to see, well, to some extent, if the economic theories we have learned for the last 20, 40, 50 years, if they still apply today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Preville. Mr. Rayneau Gajadhar.
Hi, good evening. Thanks very much for inviting me to this panel discussion this evening. I'm Rayneau Gajadhar, Managing Director of the RG Group of Companies. I've been a businessman for quite some time, I think from school. I think I always wanted to be a businessman. I wanted to have my own business. We have grown very much in St. Lucia and now have expanded to the other islands. We are in St. Vincent, Dominica, Antigua, and now in Guyana, kind of bigger than we are in St. Lucia. Guyana, you know, being the market now for all of us. So I am here and continue to expand. I don't know, but I think maybe I am the one with more employees. So I think my view on work for the future may be a lot different from the others. But let's see how it goes tonight. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. And Ms. Michele Marius.
Hi and good evening, everyone. I guess thank you for inviting me to be on this panel this evening. Originally, I am an engineer by training. I also have a degree in law. And so my work experience has been in telecommunications and ICT, starting in policy and then moving on to regulation. And now I work as a consultant. I have worked in the Caribbean, across the Caribbean region, as well as in Southeast Asia and Australasia. And currently I have a consulting company in Jamaica. It's headquartered in Jamaica. But I also have been the publisher of ICT Pulse, which has been around for almost 10 years now, and where we try to discuss ICT issues from a Caribbean perspective. Oftentimes, there are a number of issues happening within the region or outside the region, and we probably often do not necessarily think about how we in the region will be affected. So I try to give some insight into that through ICT Pulse. And I also have a podcast, which just allows us to deepen the conversation and to talk with key resource persons and experts across the region. So I have actually, and it's probably quite ironic as well, that for the podcast, I had hoped to be doing this year 1 episode a month on the future of work. However, I think as relevant as it is, COVID-19 has also just thrown things up in the air, and to some extent, as much as one may have a sense as to the general trends within the future of work, I think we were in a period of adjustment over the last couple of months. So I think it's just very timely that we are having this conversation, because I think so much, probably even more so now, we are going to need to reposition ourselves, those who are already in the workforce and those who will soon be part of the workforce. So thank you again.
Thank you so much, and we look forward to your perspective, particularly in light of you being an ICT specialist. So let's get into the meat of everything. I would start with Dr. Preville. Dr. Preville, how has, well, this is addressed to everybody, but how has the way people do work, particularly in your sector, how has it changed since you have entered the workforce?
Putting my microphone, 1 second.
We can hear you.
Yes, you can hear me now, I'm muted. Okay, good.
Yes.
Thanks so much again. Well, the work has been evolving for the last 10, 20 years or so. Basically, in my area of work, we do a lot of management consulting. Now, that means having to sit with clients, discuss specific problems, gather data, analyze, and then come up with some solutions. Typically, over the last 10, 15 years or so, much of that work entails traveling to a foreign location. So you typically go out to the field, you meet with a client, you spend a week or two, gather data, ask questions, etc., and compile your reports. So that has, for a greater part, been the way it has operated then. In parallel, of course, there's been the aspect of also doing work remotely, and doing work remotely is not an entirely new thing, I have to say. We've had other ways of doing this pre-Zoom. We've had other ways like Skype, and more recently like WhatsApp and other such platforms. But the COVID-19 definitely has become a kind of a game changer, because you can't travel at this point, and it has forced us to, rethink the way we do things. So increasingly, I'm doing more, utilizing more cloud facilities in my own work. I use Dropbox extensively, and of course, Microsoft's cloud as well. And I see more of this unfolding in the coming days, in the coming months, as we put much of the office virtually, thereby giving access to all our consultants, and at the same time, giving ourselves more data security. So I think by way of introduction, this is really where I am at right now.
Thank you, Dr. Preville. And Genevieve, as an international trade lawyer, how has more or less the landscape changed in light of the digital revolution?
Thanks for the question. I will put on my hat also now in a role of a quasi-educator, because now I sit in a center that really is the leading center for trade policy training in the region. So in my personal capacity or professional capacity as a lawyer, as a trade lawyer, because of the work that I do is quite international, I think the need to be in touch with international experts continues. And I can tell you of a personal experience that I'm now serving on a WTO panel.
I'll just say it on the chat.
There's a lot of background noise here, hearing, yeah. So there's quite a lot of international conferences and international deliberations that have to take place for experts from all over the world. And whereas previously, as I think Claudius was saying, there would be, a lot of expenses, no expenses spared to getting people in the same room to discuss issues. That is no longer the case. And I think COVID has become, as people have said, a game changer, but it's also presented an opportunity to work smarter. Work all hours of the day and night, because obviously, now COVID makes it like geographical boundaries impossible to respect, because everybody is now in theory available online. So one of the things that has changed, if you're in the international space, is that you're changing your working hours and you're changing your sleeping patterns. That certainly has happened for me. So I think, the opportunities are abounding now, and people's sense of boundaries between where is work and where is personal time has become very, very fuzzy. So that's as a professional. Even working with court systems and uploading documents online, and even litigating through online platforms is changing the cues also that you look for by way of behavioral kind of inputs you get from people when you're speaking to them. You're no longer in the room to pick up a vibe. And people have said now that people are even more exhausted trying to do a lot of their work using the Zoom platform, because you're using other senses to get, right now we're talking into the void. I don't know what people are thinking. I don't know what people are saying. So that is increasing. On the level of more, I guess, working as an educator and forming the younger minds. I mean, we deal with master's students. Zoom is giving us a glimpse into the future, creating massive opportunities to sell our products internationally. But it also meant that in the space of 2 to 3 weeks, when the Cave Hill campus was locked down, our students, we have some OECS students doing a specialized master's course, suddenly had to go from face-to-face learning to online learning, and our lecturers who were teaching in classes also needed to learn how to use e-learning platforms. And the difference is not just in sitting in front of a classroom and teaching as if, you know, all you're doing, the only change is the platform. You're thinking also all the time about how to present information in bite-sized ways so that people with a lower concentration span who have Facebook and all of these other distractions will actually want to engage in the learning process in a very different way. So I guess, you know, and there's much more to talk about there, but I think the reaction and the COVID giving us a glimpse into the future, at least for those of us who are on this panel, shows some insights into what's going to happen. And my concern more is not really for us who have the availability of the e-learning platforms to us, but what about persons in other sectors who don't even have internet connection? And I'm sure we'll talk about the digital divide and women in work and these sorts of things, but I just wanted to start the ball rolling with these perspectives that were more personal.
Thank you so much, Jenny. Very, very educational. And now I'll go to Mr. Gajadhar as an entrepreneur and a business person. How has it changed?
Well, it's much different for me because a lot of my actual work is actually in the field. While it is that we have a lot of office work, one of the things we have done for a very long time was we have always used the internet to do a lot of our stuff because of a lot of our accounting and records and follow-ups and documentation is actually not even done in St. Lucia. It is actually done in India. Although the time difference, but we have used it and it has worked. That is on this part of it. When it comes to the actual work, which is the construction work, but you know it has affected us majorly because work had to stop, people cannot move. It's just made it so different. Our timelines, our suppliers, shipping, moving people around to the different islands. This has been crazy. I mean, I got guys stuck in the other islands for 3 months, not being able to move. And what I normally do is to move the various skills around in the different islands. That was not able to happen. So we got held back on a lot of stuff that we had to do because the personnel was stuck in the other islands. However, I think it's going to be a major change. There's a lot of good that's going to come out of it. One of the good was we used to see a lot of people running away to the US and Canada. Now people want to run back to the Caribbean because it seems to be safer than there. So there is good coming out of it. And all those people who wanted to run away actually are looking for jobs and want to stay and want to be almost secure now in jobs because they know it's not really as secure out there. So there is a lot of good in it. And I think what we have to do is pick the best out of it and see how we could. It's going to be a change. We just have to accept it and we have to work with it. The disadvantage of it is the persons who are not as good are the ones that are going to stay without work. The better people are always going to be in jobs. I mean, it was always that way, but with everything closing in, we're going to see it more. So even in the construction industry for us, all those hotels and all those warehouses and all those construction activities we used to see people coming up with, I think that's going to be dead for another 2 years until people get back to used to getting things done to move it. There are going to be very few items of work that is going to come up. I mean, road construction will never stop. It will always continue, but it's going to slow down. But when we come to the actual building construction, even for homes, that would have slowed down because the banks are not lending. Jobs are not secure. So we are going to see a major, major downturn in the economy in every sector of it. However, I think agriculture and food sustainability for us should be paramount on the minds of governments of all of the islands. As you know, there is going to end up being a food shortage eventually, because even when we imported our food, those people have major problems and bigger than us. So for us to be able to sustain ourselves, I think we need to have a major thrust in agriculture and self-sustainability. There's a lot that I can say. I mean, I think I need to give another chance there. But for the future of work in my industry, I see it's so much different. It's going to make actual construction activities a little more expensive because of the way it is. The time on producing a job is going to be significantly longer because you cannot get the inputs, you cannot get people moving. You're restricted so much on it, but we just have to get used to a new world. And I think that new world, you know, again, who can organize better is going to survive a lot better.
Thank you so much. And I noticed that you sort of ran into our next segment, but I'm very excited to hear what each and every panelist has to say after that. And I would go to Ms. Marius now. How would you say the way people have done work, or you have done work, has changed since you've entered the labor force in terms of the digital revolution?
Okay, a couple of things. First, at least for me personally, I guess when I started, I was employed, gainfully employed. However, now I work on my own. You know, I am an entrepreneur. So at least for me, and I think one of the reasons why I have been able to do it is because of technology. As a consultant and working in the ICT space, I can procure work remotely. And in many instances, I can deliver that work remotely. So at least for me, that has been the impact of technology professionally. But I'm looking at the broader industry. There are probably two key points that I want to make. First, and just tied in generally to COVID-19, so just doing a comparison. Previously, I guess probably less than 6 months ago, you would find that the IT department in an organization would be almost like a necessary evil. And you'd probably find that it would be, you know, pulling teeth to get new technology in and so on. It had to be, you're fighting a battle with your finance department and your accounts department to justify, you know, why one might want to upgrade your systems and so on. And I think with COVID, what has happened is that because businesses now realize that they need technology to survive, you find out that IT has become a strategic tool, and therefore the I guess CIO, your head of the IT department, is now sitting at the boardroom table and having an input into, you know, corporate decisions and corporate strategies. I think one of the things that I want to also say is that what is in the lockdowns and so on that have happened, and the stay-at-home arrangements that have happened to try to manage infections over the last, you know, few months. I think post-COVID-19, I guess we expect that at some point we may get a handle on it and be able to manage the infections and maybe even have a vaccine. It will not be work as usual as it was pre-COVID-19. A lot of businesses, I think, have realized that people, their employees can work successfully remotely. In many industries, they recorded even higher productivity than when they were at home. When they were in the office. And some of that, I think, has to do with the point that Jan made about the fact that work and relaxation, your work and home life has become blurred. You're probably actually spending more time working when you're at home as opposed to when you're in the office, and you could physically leave and therefore switch off and then say, okay, this is my personal life and my personal time. So I think going forward, remote work will be with us, and it may actually affect Rayneau's profession, because you may find that we no longer need all of that real estate anymore, and some of it actually may need to be repurposed as organizations realize they probably don't even need to have their entire staff, you know, accommodated in their office space, you know, all at once. People are rotating in and out of the office and so on. So I think we are seeing what is going to be, I think, a longer term transformation and revolution within the workplace, thanks to the, the predicament we have found ourselves in.
Wow, thank you so much, Ms. Marius. And my next question for the panelists relates to well, I should say my favorite part, traditional education versus skills. One of the researchers recently stated that a lot of people coming out of university, maybe in 10 years' time, perhaps the degree that they pursued might be invalid and probably even without purpose. In light of what has been said, people are asking for focus on skills as opposed to traditional education. And in light of that, I would like each person to comment on what are their views, what skills do they see necessary? And I would start with Dr. Preville. What is your view of traditional education and skills? Don't forget to unmute your mic.
All right, thank you so much, Alberta. It's an interesting discussion. Traditional education, as we've done it in the Caribbean, has been mostly geared towards like competition. Let's see if this one is better than that one. You take the common entrance, and it begins from, nowadays I have 2 kids and they're like in grade 2 and grade 5, and the stress kids are at this stage now, I can't recall being at that level of stress when I was in primary school myself. But that system we have so far has not worked very well, to be frank, because it's all about just learning and acquiring a lot of knowledge and having it saved in your head somewhere and trying to impress somebody to know something about the world. In fact, increasingly what's happening is there is no need to be retaining gazillions of megabytes of data in our heads. What is more important is to be able to know where to find the data when the need arises, okay? I think this is one of the things we have to emphasize in the future of the whole learning experience. Skills as opposed to formal education. Now, I want to say this, formal education will always remain an important feature of the way the world functions. If I recall reading an article on the issue of the future of work in relation to the European Union. There's a comprehensive study that was done sometime earlier this year. And what they found was that the lowest skilled, the lowest educated jobs, the jobs at the lowest levels of education, tend to be the ones that have been shrinking over time. The ones with the highest level of specialization, specialized knowledge, are the ones that have been growing in the European Union. So, and those in the middle somewhere found themselves moving up as well, not as fast as the high-tech, high-skilled ones. So it seems to me that we need to, while we focus on skills, it can't just be a question of saying we're going to get a basket of skills and you use that skill when called upon, you use another skill when called upon. No, you still need to have a strong base, a baseline in terms of your own knowledge, your own discipline. But on that, you have to build the skills. Now, what kind of skills are we talking about? One important aspect would have to be, the IT side of it, Michele's portfolio. People need to have computer skills, right? Because a lot of things can be automated now. And one of the challenges will be to actually identify what can be automated and how to go about doing that through some computer program, some robot, some artificial intelligence mechanism to actually get it done. But in terms of the employees themselves and in terms of supervision of work, you will always need human beings to be doing this. There's no computer or robot you can get to actually try and replace that relationship. So what I think I'm finding in terms of my own research in this area is that work will remain important for human beings in areas where there is high specialization, high skills, and so on. And so the emphasis has to be in those areas in terms of the next generation of people in the St. Lucia, the OECS we want to train. But the tasks that are very mundane and routine that can be automated easily, those tasks are the ones that robots and AI will take over in the coming days, and we have to be sensitive to that and position the workforce to start thinking that way. Remote work is something that, based on another study I had a look at in the United States, remote work has increased significantly since the COVID-19. And there is, I think a McKinsey report is saying that some 48% of employees work remotely post-COVID versus about only 30% 6 months ago. So we see there is a huge impact. Data collection is changing a lot as well, and there is the employer is becoming now the kind of a catch-all category for doing too many things. The employer now becomes the social security house. He has to provide not just salaries and wages, but also, you know, more social capital for his employees. I can't speak much on that. I'm sure Rayneau might be able to be more authoritative in this area. So I think these are some of the areas I see we have to think about when we talk about skills versus education. Formal education, there is always going to be a need. The European experience tells us that if we want to move our population to the next level, if we want to become a so-called developed region, we have to focus on that formal education. However, we have to augment that with the relevant skills that have to go into formal education to ensure that employees keep upskilling themselves, not just learning something and say, I'm a lawyer today, that's it, I'm not going to read any more articles. No, you have to keep reading the relevant material, and you have to remain a specialist in your area for you to command your position in the market.
Thank you so much, Dr. Preville. I really, really appreciate your input as it relates to that. I would now turn to Miss Remy, Dr. Remy rather. What is your view?
Yes, I think we've all been reading the same articles. The World Bank has written a paper on the changing nature of work. The World Economic Forum is coming out with the future of, work. So I think we all are on the same page about this nuanced view about ICT and robots taking over the world. I think, the evidence and the research puts a lie to the notion that every single skill set can be automated into a robotic kind of transactional almost enterprise where, the human touch is no longer required or no longer valued. I think the reading suggests that routine tasks, such as I read about payrolling, and Mr. Gajadhar is giving, evidence of that, is that those at the higher levels of the employer chain can take these services and get it done online, either, by much cheaper workers in India and other places like that. But that's the world we live in. We can source that material very quickly. And so it begs the question of what is left for those of us who are working in these areas. And also when we think about more macroeconomic, what does that mean for the construction workers, the tourism workers, for people in agriculture? And I think that's a really, really important question. On the bigger macro picture, let me just say that I was listening to an interview by Jack Dorsey, who is, the CEO of Twitter. And what he was saying is that even in the choice, when all of these social media gurus, and a lot of you on this platform probably are, I know James and Alberta probably, when you decide how to place a button to like something or to retweet it, that involves social behavioral skills. That's not something that is new to the internet era. That's something that you employ a social behaviorist, a psychologist to decide. How do you place things? That's marketing. So it's really looking at the new phenomenon, but older skill sets. The new economy is going to have a huge backlash on how people view themselves as part of society. Psychologists are going to be more and more in demand. Another report said that, you cannot automate a kind gesture from a nurse. So as much as a lot of the things are going to be automated and a lot of the things are going to be upskilled, and you're going to be able to almost, I would say, break up transactions and get value outside of the local geography and get value from outside, some of the things still rely on the human touch and human intuition. And I think that's where, you know, when the psychologist is talking about things like children learning through playing, learning reactions to things, thinking about things, cognitive skills. These are the things that we really need to start thinking about in this post-COVID environment, when you have school children not being in the same class with each other, not learning about collaboration and teamwork. In all of these enterprises, you're going to need people working across geographical locations and boundaries. And these are the skills that we need to teach our people. So I think there's a lot of talk about ICT and the internet and changing things. And we definitely have to go in that direction and thinking of how we automate and how we actually take advantage of the technologies. But that cannot come at the expense of the more basic educations that we teach our young people about caring and about teamwork and about collaboration and about reasoning. These things are still going to be relevant in the next economy. And I really, really want to talk a lot more about not just providing services, but also consuming them. So when we think about e-commerce and we think about more and more skills being available online, and even government processes, access to banking services, access to government services such as paying for your license. Governments are moving hugely into that area. Even if we don't think about employees in the future as using these online, social media, data cloud computing, all of these more fancy kind of skills, they're still going to have to learn how to utilize the systems that are going to be increasingly automated. Bank tellers are no longer going to be as popular or as common in banks. You know, standing in line for your passport to be changed is not going to happen for much longer because that's all going to go online. And so we need to build into this that the common man, the common person has to also be digitally literate, not because we have a huge expectation that the construction worker is tomorrow going to become the social media digital entrepreneur, but more because they're part of a society that is going to be increasingly automated. And if they're not upskilled, just at the very basic level of understanding how to utilize their cell phone in order to transact something without using cash, they also need to be part of the overall strategy for digital literacy. And I think that part of the equation needs to always be front and center on our minds as well.
Thank you so much. I really appreciated the mere fact that you spoke about the balance and the importance of the human touch. Because with technology coming into play and technology playing a bigger role, we'll definitely see less and less of human-to-human interaction. And I think that's a very important skill that we need to focus on as well. So thank you for that, Dr. Remy. So I would now go on to Mr. Gajadhar. I'm very excited to hear your opinion. Traditional education versus skills, what is your view? What advice would you give to young persons, etc.?
Dr. Preville and Dr. Remy put a lot together, and with all what they said, it has its place. However, for me, because of the type of business I'm in, a lot of that goes out the window. How do you get automation to go and put up blocks in a building? How do you get to build a road automated? All of this, even garbage collection from the lowest levels of people being, laborers, mechanics. A lot of this, you still need people. However, with the new technology, yes, they have to learn the skills of computers and how they work, because, right now, most of the vehicles and equipment all computerized. You could literally download it and see what's going on with it off your phone. So, but people are going to learn it. I am not afraid for the future generations in this, kids now, I think they're born with the digital era within them, even from the first day they're born. At 3 years old, they tell you, look, WhatsApp me, at 3 years old. So I don't think it's going to be a major problem. However, if we put in the context of the Caribbean, our small space, I think it's a much different than for the larger spaces. It's going to take a really long time for us to go to that area where we use robots and so on to get anything done. First of all, our economy scale, it just doesn't make sense to invest in that type of equipment. So we are still going to be using all of our people. What we are going to continuously have, which we still have now, is the lack of the higher education and skills for moving into the next level. We have that. We all have it. So even for me, I am the dealer for Hyundai construction equipment. Even to get personnel to be able to repair and follow up on the new equipment, it is extremely difficult. We have to be training and training and training persons. But you know, most people within the Caribbean, within my space, they're not ready or they don't even care to even learn and be better. I think we have a major problem bigger than, you know, what's out there, what you listen to, news, CNN, what you hear the reports. That's on a really much bigger scale than what we have. It cannot work within our space. I think many have tried and they failed because it just cannot work. We need to look at our space, what's necessary for our space, and how is it going to work. What I think we need is, you know, the actual skills. And one of the things I think we need to move to is vocational schools. I think every student needs to pass through 1 year of vocational schooling. People buy a car and they don't know how to change a tire. They don't even know where the wheel spanner is. How can we continue to deliver that? I have had to stop on the road and help men and women because they don't know how to deliver it. They don't even know where to find it. I mean, those are small things, but they are big. But I mean, those are well-educated people. Those are people that, I mean, like, you know, I couldn't fit in the shoes when it comes to education. But the small things, they have no idea how to do. Those are things we have to continue doing for ourselves. We need to continue. We need to focus on the smaller people. But, you know, Dr. Preville said that we need to go and learn to be at the higher levels. One of the problems is, you know, Dr. Remy had to leave St. Lucia, not because she wanted to leave, but she had to leave because if she had stayed here, her skills would not have been utilized around here. So what do? Go learn, educate ourselves, and our small space cannot use us and our skills and make us any better. So what happens? They all go away. How do we encompass what we have and the people that we have to utilize them and make us better? Most of the people who went and got further education, they all left, and only because you cannot use it. Right now, I'm sure you still know that of so many people who went to universities overseas, came back, and still not doing any job close to what they went to school for, whether they liked it or not. But the fact is, it is not available. How do we look at this and how do we prepare for the people of our region and what we do and how do we make it better for them? You know, agriculture. What can we do with our terrain to mechanize agriculture? Very little. I mean, you know, with our terrain, you still need people to walk up a hill and carry a bag of fertilizer, carry the fruit down. There's very little space that you could mechanize. So in our region, mechanization of agriculture is a no, with the exception of Trinidad and Guyana, which has a little flatter space. All of the other islands, it's just too mountainous for you to mechanize it, but we still have to eat. We still have to feed our children. And I think it's going to get more expensive and more difficult in the coming years based on COVID, because just what governments and what people are trying to push is not going out and work. Let's stay at home. Let's do it at home. Let's do this. So I can foresee a food shortage. And that food shortage is going to be bigger than people expect it to be. How do we deal with it? How do we deal with it for our region? And I'm not thinking globally, I'm thinking for our region, for my space, right? My space, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, Grenada, Dominica. Trinidad is a little different. Guyana, I think, is best poised to develop and do very well because they have the land, they have the people, and I think it's well placed now. They have the money as well. But what happens to us, and how do we deal with our generations coming? Let's go back to the schools. We go back to the schools. Now with everybody being home, being online, not meeting other people, how do they interact? What are friends going to become? Will they be really friends? And how do we deal with each other? When you leave school, being in your environment, in your little hole, in your little space only, and you have to go out into the real world for you to meet people, how is it going to be? How are they going to react? Because they're not used to being around people. It is going to be so different. Things are going to have to change so much. Our whole personalities will change. Yes, like you say, our passports, our licenses, our cash system of payment. A lot of things are going to change. But for our region, we still need to make all those preparations for what we just cannot do. It just cannot do. It will not work in our region. And we need to prepare ourselves for what's going to happen. I think a lot of our leaders and a lot of the people who make the decisions are people who are well educated and see things from a total different perspective and point of view, leaving behind all of those people because they cannot apply to those people. I mean, maybe that's why I can apply myself to it, and maybe that's why I can talk about it. But I see so many people left behind in all of this. I still have workers who cannot use an ATM card. They cannot sign a name. So it's going to take a long time. I think it's going to take another 20 years when, kids from now start to grow up for us to be able to see a major difference. But we still have a long time to move on before that happens. Our government needs to focus. I would like to bring a message where our governments need to focus on food security. I don't think they have understood the importance of food security, and our people are going to go hungry. The cost of living just to eat is becoming ridiculous. And, and it's not the supermarket's fault. It is just that bringing it out from overseas is actually very expensive, a lot more expensive than it ever used to be. Next year, what happens to us with another year of COVID, where you have so many people that are not going out? What's going to really happen to us? Are we going to make some computer food to eat? And those are the things we have to think about in the real world. I mean, I'm not at the other level where a lot of work takes place in-house. You could do it from home and so on. This has its place. But the reality of the basics of living, I mean, you still must have a toilet, you still must have a plumber, you still must have water coming to your house. You still must have electricity and so many other things that you still must have that I don't think that they have taken into consideration. And I think we need to split it down the line and look at the lower half for a little while and see what's going to happen. There's going to be such a massive void space at one point in time that we are going to be surprised at our own self. What happened? Why did it happen? Why did we allow it to happen? And that is what I would like to bring across, to make sure that we think about it, that we don't create that big void, that we step so far up that we forget the middle space and realize that when we are looking to come back down, the steps were half gone.
Wow, thank you so much. This really provided a balance to the conversation. And in fact, I'm really excited to hear what Michele has to say, because Michele has moved from the academic world and now she's an entrepreneur. So Ms. Marius, can you just give us your thoughts? Traditional education versus skills. What do you think? What are your views? How do you see us moving forward as an ICT consultant? Okay.
Actually, I'm wondering whether or not I should go or let Jan go, because I've been looking at her expression and seeing her chomp at the bit to at least, I think, probably whether refute or probably at least respond to some of Rayneau's points. So I'll just be brief because I think it might be important to let Jan have a say. I think I definitely agree at least with what Claudius and Jan had said. Rayneau, I have some issue with yours, but I will address at least in brief later. So just in terms of education, I do think though, and just emphasizing some of the earlier points, that upskilling and continuous learning is crucial. Gone are the days when you could have just gotten your degree or, you know, finish high school and that would be it and you'd be in a job, you know, until you retire. I think, you know, we're having, whether or not, we are pivoting a lot and changing careers throughout our working life. And because the workplace is also changing and the needs are changing, and to be promoted is not necessarily just on tenure, how long you've been in a position, but you really need to be having the skills that are required. So I think that is essential. Then just also to talk about the education system, I have a bit of an issue, but it's something that I think clearly it may not necessarily be easy to solve. I think our education system, albeit in the Caribbean, is based on the Industrial Revolution, you know, the 1800s, when you were looking at mass production and you needed workers. You needed people who would basically follow instructions and probably not necessarily be creative thinkers and innovators and so on. However, today's world, when you're looking at collaboration, innovation, companies want their employees to be able to contribute to developing, you know, new strategies and tactics that can be used. I think you may find that based on just the education system, you know, we learn to pass exams most of the time. So you're not necessarily rewarded within the classroom for thinking outside the box. You need to give the teacher the answer that they expect, right? To be able to pass the exam that they're preparing you for. So I think things like that may need to be addressed going forward so that at least our employees, our workers, our population become a little bit more prepared for the workplace that is evolving. I just also want to emphasize a point I think Jan made about digital literacy, because it's not necessarily just about computing skills, but understanding the nuances and the implications of technology. So even matters related to security, cybersecurity, how to use your passwords, not using, being mindful about emails that you get that might be questionable. Where would you use your, public networks? So we all connect to Wi-Fi's, but what public Wi-Fi is, free Wi-Fi, but what are the implications? Matters related to privacy, data protection, just even for our personal information. What is our personal information? What are our rights where that is concerned? And, and a number of other issues that are not necessarily dealing with technical skills, whether or not you can use, a computer or various applications, which are becoming increasingly important, but it's probably more about not necessarily the actual proficiency that you have, which is good, but whether the comfort that you have in using technology. You can always learn, but if you're intimidated by it, then we're going to have a problem. Touching on Rayneau's, some of the points that he was making, and I recognize that clearly working with the cohort of people that he probably encounters on a regular basis, that these are challenges. However, as much as, for example, St. Lucia being a place that he referenced, we may not necessarily be able to, use, sophisticated machinery to plant because of the terrain, but we can leverage technology in terms of information. For example, thanks to climate change, gone are the days when you thought that, the dry season would be when it had been before and the rainy season would be as it had been before. Having access to real-time information about, weather patterns and whether or not it's going to rain today, and it's not necessarily the fact that you think that, oh, we in, March, so we're in the dry season. That is not what is happening nowadays. So even though we may not be able to mechanize you know, different aspects because of lack of the economy of scale, we can leverage technology in different ways to inform us, to help us to make better decisions, to help us to be more efficient. I think certainly there are some gaps in terms of whether or not, or the extent to which some of our, you know, population have the basic skills, not even digital literacy, but even basic literacy, as he's saying, to be able to navigate the society today, not necessarily the one that is to come. And that, I think, is something that has to be addressed, but I don't know whether or not it is to not acknowledge that the world is evolving and we need to figure out how best to position ourselves to be part of the, I guess, eminent paradigm.
Yes, thank you so much. And I noticed Dr. Genevieve Remy has a few words. So I would allow you to speak as you seem eager.
No,
don't forget
I don't want to hog the mic, as they would say, but I have a very expressive face. But I think Mr. Gajadhar is being provocative. I think he wants to stir the pot a little bit. I think Michele, you did a good job at kind of like putting some of the things on the table. I don't think any of us is trying to increase elitism in the sense of us being on this side and sort of, you know, the common person not being capable of being involved in this conversation. I think that would be actually to do a disservice. I think assuming that technology cannot help and provide solutions is actually a retrograde step. It's because it's our responsibility to look at the world trends and position St. Lucia and the region in a way that we can capitalize on them. I think saying that we cannot eat computers, it's funny, but at the end of the day, this is our job. Our job is to be able to find these spaces for our small economy. E-commerce is a platform for our young entrepreneurs. And digital entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship, you know, yes, they're on the higher scale of the jobs of tomorrow. These are people who are developing apps and developing platforms. And everybody, as I mentioned before, is not going to grow up to do that. But what they're doing is enabling people, the very agriculturists and farmers, to get the platform to apply their skill and to sell their product. So everybody is not going to be equally placed on the value chain, but what we have to do is identify the trends and figure out the ways to bring persons with these skill sets that are more traditional onto and into the new technology of tomorrow. And I'm going to give you an example. Last year I went to Mauritius for a good friend of mine's wedding. I was able to book from where I was in Barbados, book my taxi service online, as well as every other aspect. So the touring online. Now you would say that, you know, tourism and all of these people are not going to wake up tomorrow and be able to take advantage of all of the technology, but who is providing the bus driver with these opportunities? It's the technical, it's the ICT platforms. Who is providing the farmer, as Michele was saying, with a sense of, you know, weather patterns, giving them the tools to figure out what commodity prices for their farmers are in Europe, so that they can know how much the cost of production is and what that ultimately is going to mean for them in the countries that are their ultimate markets. Who at the end of the, I mean, when you think about taking an order in a restaurant, who is taking that? Who is able to automate the process instead of writing it down? These are all areas that we need to think about bringing everybody on board. And that was our point. I think it's not to say that, and even construction workers, I mean, our job, and I imagine as a huge employer, is to, yes, technology has already integrated and infiltrated the construction sector. I looked at it before I came because I was thinking manufacturing, construction, tourism, all of these industries are becoming more automated. And so the creative sector, when we think of our festivals, who didn't watch Bounty Killer and Beanie Man? That is a revenue earner potential. Jamaica is capitalizing on it. Our performers, how do we sell them? How do we think about using online platforms to sell our indigenous creative industry and sectors and our festivals. So I think I'm partial to your view, sir, that yes, we can't get ahead, but I think it's our job to think very creatively about how we bring everybody on board from the education sector and how we streamline education and focus on the things to the higher skilled workers who are going to build the platforms, do the coding, do the data privacy networks, the cybersecurity. We need these people. We also need people to create the platforms for locals to utilize. We also need the platforms to be able to do cashless transactions so that people who are not banked and who have to, for instance, stand up outside Western Union to get money can do that without wasting their time and sitting in their home and getting the money from remittances overseas. It's a huge, huge enterprise we're talking about. And I think it's our obligation as people in the know to bring that educational experience and these thoughts to think about ways of transforming our society.
Thank you, Dr. Remy. And I would allow Mr. Gajadhar to speak because he seems quite eager right now. So you can go ahead.
I mean, point well taken that we all have our space. However, with all the information that they're going to give me for agriculture, when the rain is going to fall and when the sun is going to shine, who's going to go and do the planting? You must have the person to go and do the planting. I'm not saying it does not have its space. All I'm saying is, I am talking about my space. I want to focus that my space, I'm not talking about globally. I'm talking about my space. What happens within my space? And what you're talking, my space is a much different from what you're talking. So yes, who's going to be the taxi driver? Soon from now, there'll be no taxi driver. There'll be a car with nobody in it. And I understand that. It's already there. But at that point in time, the level of skill of the person necessary to monitor the car with nobody, it's only 1 for 100,000 cars. What happens to everybody else? Have we made space for everybody that we are getting rid of? Have we ever thought of that? What we are doing? I mean, with a click of a button, I now can go and get my whole balance sheet. Once the information has been put in, all I could do is just click one key and I get a balance sheet. So those are accountants that we needed, but guess what? We still need people to put the information in and we still need to put them in properly. My point is we must not forget about those other people that are going to be left behind. And many of them are going to be left behind because of what's happening. And many of them are not used to, cannot, will not. You know, the level of thinking of the people growing up is nowhere close to what people used to be. I used to have to learn times table, and I used to have to learn up to 12 timetable behind the exercise book. Now, everybody goes to a phone to answer what is 2 by 2. Yes, it has changed. What happens to our people in terms of the level of thinking? And if we had to have if I had to just ask a question, what is 12 times 12? Somebody will have to think and maybe get the calculator. But this is where I'm going to. What are we going to do with all those people that we're leaving behind? Yes, you have gone. I am going to, and I would like to go. Why? Automation and the new technology that is available makes it happen a lot easier, a lot faster. That's a reality. Will I do it? Yeah. If I could get the trucks with no drivers, I'd be the happiest man. Because I know for sure he ain't going to drink rum because it's only because of a guy. So I would like to get the trucks with no drivers. However, how far is that away from us within our space? For it to really work, GPS, traffic, we have so much to do within our own space. How far are we away from it? The reality is, I think we were good 20 years away from it. What do I deal with now? How do I deal with it? What do I deal with in terms of the people that I have around me? How do I prepare for them? I have over 1,000 workers within the region. And those over 1,000 workers within the region, they cannot apply to what you're saying. They were very far from what you're saying. Yes, while automation does well, I mean, I have concrete plants and I have asphalt plants that are fully automated. I can go on my phone and maybe make asphalt or make concrete. That's great. But how many people can I get within the region that would want to stay and do it within the salary that I can pay? And I say that because anytime you have someone with a little skill, their demands are extremely high because you cannot find too many around. There's not even the competition there. So it makes it extremely difficult, more expensive for us. Economies of scale again. So I get your point. You are right. Yes, we can move on. Yes, we have to move on. But I am working within my space. What I have right now, what is to come? The outer world is going to inevitably make it happen, and we are followers. We cannot be leaders. We could only follow to ensure that we come within it. Look at the cars that we drive now. Every single car that we drive now has a port that you just plug a computer to, and it tells you everything that's wrong with it, where it's wrong with it, but we have very few people that even understand how to use it. Have we prepared in our region, how many people have we prepared to move to that new world? We talk about the new world. Are we preparing them? Which school, where do we have within our region that prepares people for that? We have not done that yet, but I see that we're moving forward to much further where we cannot even maintain what we have. What do I have to do? I have to bring people in from Korea, bring people in from China. Not even the US that you could find people anymore that you could take and bring across. It's extremely difficult. And the one or two that you could find within the US, the cost is prohibitive. So we have to go much further to bring them across. And thanks to air travel has become a lot cheaper, it actually makes a lot more sense to bring somebody out of China and Korea than going to the US. So I don't know if you have ever tried to get any technical stuff done out of the US to find how difficult and expensive it is for you to get it done. Europe, we can't even talk about it. The cost is exorbitant. What do we do for ourselves and how do we continue to live for our region? Yes, it has its place. Yes, we're going to move there. But at what pace are we going to move there? And what are we going to leave behind in the process of moving to that direction? And what void are we going to create? I mean, I can continue and continue, but I mean, I understand you, but remember, I have it. I experience it every day, every other day right now. I mean, as I sit here, once I leave you, I leave and I go to the airport to do a job on the airport in St. Lucia because we work at night. And why do I personally have to go? Because I cannot find someone to use a specialized piece of equipment. And it may sound strange to you and you ask me why, but it's a specialized piece of equipment that you cannot find people to use. And can we get people that want to learn it? It's more difficult than you would want to believe because they don't even want to learn it. So we are in a very, very difficult position when you're in that real world. I just happen to be in the real world to understand it from the bottom to halfway. I think you're on halfway going to up. So I think we'll see it much differently.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Gajadhar. And Dr. Preville, any thoughts on what Mr. Gajadhar had indicated as an economist and looking at it from a macroeconomic perspective? Any thoughts?
Well, yeah, actually, I wanted to weigh in on the discussion for some time now. I think there are a couple of things I agree with Mr. Gajadhar in some respects, but there are a few things that have to be also thought about. When I look at, for example, our macroeconomic structure, not only St. Lucia, for most of the OECS countries, the sectors that I see right now that potentially facing the threat of heavy or full automation in the next 5 to 10 years include the manufacturing sector, For St. Lucia, that's about 3.4% of the GDP. The wholesale and retail trade, that is a very, very vulnerable one. 9.5% of the GDP goes into that in 2019. The construction sector, 3.7% of GDP, Mr. Rayneau sector. Aspects of accommodation and food services, all the hotels and restaurants, etc., 21.2%. And also aspects of the telecommunications, ICT, of course, 4.5%. Those sectors I just called out, I think we must spend a little more time and look at them closer, because they are sectors that lend themselves to some degree of automation, either full or heavy automation. Even construction. Nowadays, I happen to be doing some work with one guy who's in the real estate sector. And you now have machines you can actually bring in that can set up for you an entire building, right? Provide you the entire foundation, the roofing, and the whole lot. And you can put up a building in like a matter of weeks, you know, a matter of days to weeks. So that technology is now there, and these kinds of things can be automated. If you're doing like a massive development with 45 homes or 50 homes, this kind of thing can be done now. So I think it is a fact that some sectors will be affected a lot more than others. No, the sectors will not be affected equally, but we have to be very clear in our minds that some sectors will lend themselves to more automation and others to less automation. The other thing about automation and robots, etc., is that technical feasibility of doing something is one thing, but there's also the issue of the financial feasibility, right? It may not always be financially viable to do certain things when it comes to utilizing new technology. So we have that. We have the issue of the labor market itself changing, and we have the issue of whether people actually benefit, whether they see benefits to automation beyond just substituting labor for the robot or whatever artificial intelligence should be using, and the question of whether it is socially acceptable as well. So there are a number of other things that we have to think about. Again, going back to some of the work the thinkers in that area have been pushing, especially from the United States. They would say to you things like, if you're preparing fast food or if you're operating machinery, any environment where you have predictable types of work, these are amenable to automation. On the other hand, where you're dealing with stuff that is not easily predictable, right? Automation is a little more complicated to introduce. So gardening, plumbing, and a whole lot of those things, even providing childcare. You're going to get a robot to take care of your child, certainly not my child, or an older adult. All right, and then again, you have other areas that may seem a little bit less attractive for the innovation for using robots and other such equipment. I think I want to make one other point in terms of the whole issue of the skills upgrading and where we fit in the Caribbean and the OECS, in particular the Caribbean in general, where we see ourselves going the next 10 to 15 years. I think the problem we've had, and someone alluded to it, I think was Michele earlier on, our whole education system is designed to produce raw labor supply, to go into a production line to actually produce something. And this is where I think the whole thing, our system is failing. We have to train people to start thinking about solving problems, not going to look for a job. Solving problems. Because when you think of an organization, really and truly, every organization worth anything actually solves problems, okay? And the solution to the problems becomes where you decide, I need the following units of labor. I need a lawyer and a technician. I need to have an economist. I need to have these different people to come in a certain mix to solve the problem, right? But our problem in the Caribbean is that we tend to be we're reacting all the time. We're not proactive enough. We have to train people to think while they're being educated, that when they're finished, they're not just going to look for a job, but some of them will have to become the creators of the jobs. Okay, that is the point. And we have to take this thing on very seriously. Right now, I see very strong potential for outsourcing work in the area of my own area in management consulting. You take the United States, for example. If you want to go there as a management consultant now, it's only possible really on the NAFTA, if you're part of the NAFTA agreement, in terms of a soft entry and visa. Otherwise, you have to get some O1 visa if you have highly specialized knowledge and skills, which we do not have access under any other trade agreement for right now in the United States, right? But the flip side is that there's no reason why a solution firm cannot take on certain aspects of management consulting from a McKinsey or some larger firm in the United States and actually perform the work right here in St. Lucia. There's no reason why not, okay? But we don't think that way. We think we have to move to the place where the job is located, or we think we have to go and create and look for a job somewhere else that may not even be appropriate. So I think that is something we have to give some serious thought to as well. And the whole question, I think I saw a question about the Caribbean lagging behind. Again, why should we always see ourselves as lagging behind? The technology we're talking about tonight, the lion's share of this is not produced in the United States anymore. It's produced in China, right? Now, China is in many ways, it's a superpower, but it's also a developing country, right? It's a developing country. When you think about the way it treats wages, factors of production, it is a very classical developing country. At the same time, it has moved to another level of maturation that makes it a superpower, okay? I believe we have access to that same technology that China is producing and is selling to the United States and Europe. We have access to it today. So there is no reason why we should allow another technology gap stand in our way and impede us from going where we need to be going as a Caribbean people. The Caribbean countries have to position themselves to take advantage of the technologies. I think that is what it is, and to take advantage of the geographical relationship we have with the United States and Europe to a large extent, where we have, with all its imperfections, at least we have an economic partnership agreement with the European Union that we have to start harnessing to see how there can be more mode 1 and mode 4, cross-border services supply, and of course, providing services in person from time to time in those markets. So these are some of the things I see that could be some element of the responses to Mr. Gajadhar's point. I want to close by saying also that the point in agriculture, I'm with you 100%. Frankly, I made a presentation about 3 weeks ago, and I've been looking at St. Lucia in the post-COVID environment. I'm like, are we understanding anything at all from this pandemic? We want to rebuild the economy on tourism? Really? Really? It's not going to work. We have to understand that, first of all, tourism is fickle in its own way. Okay? But secondly, look what happened recently. We had the United States just declared another travel warning on St. Lucia, level 3. Okay? I was told it's level 4 before, now it's level 3. But really, but who decides those things? So we have an industry that hinges on, we have an industry that is, it accounts for the lion's share of all our GDP, but we have no control over it because one guy has to sit in Washington and say tomorrow, look, we're going to impose a travel restriction, and that is it. The tourism industry shuts down. What do we do? Do we want to learn something from this pandemic? I think tourism is not the response. We have to, I'm not saying that we get out of tourism. I'm not saying we're going to get out of tourism, but I'm saying we have to diversify. And agriculture has a very important role. It's a domestic industry. Yes. And when you produce, right now, St. Lucia imports $500 million worth of food annually. $500 million of food is being imported. And guess what? We can easily produce anything from $250 to about $400 million worth of that food we are importing. We can do it right here in St. Lucia. For every $100 million of imports that are substituted, the GDP will increase by at least 200 million. You know why? Because you have a double-sided accounting, okay? In the Keynesian equation, you have a consumption effect and a production effect. You have a trade effect. So as you reduce imports by a certain amount, 100 million, and you produce locally instead, your GDP goes up not by 100 million, but by 200 million. So we can actually theoretically move this economy from 500 million of right now GDP that's being imported, we can move from that to $1 billion of GDP produced locally. But we are just obsessed with tourism, tourism, tourism. And guess what? Through that tourism channel, we have massive leakage. And this is the problem. So you see on your balance of payments, you see it look like money is coming in. There's transfers of payment coming into St. Lucia. But that money is coming in through the tourism channel, but it's leaving even faster through the trade channel. That's the problem. So Mr. Gajadhar has, I mean, Rayneau, you have an excellent point there. Agriculture must be taken much more seriously, especially in this current context with this COVID-19. And for me, the point can be emphasized more. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Preville. We're actually running out of time. I was actually worried initially that I wouldn't have enough questions, but it turns out that there are much more questions. So what I would do, I would ask everybody to leave their questions in, and I will email each person the questions that have been on the platforms, and at least to give you all an opportunity to respond. I know Mr. Gajadhar has to leave at 9, and I know Ms. Marius may be very busy, as well as Dr. Preville and Dr. Remy. So I'm sorry to cut it short. This was a very, very, very good conversation. Perhaps we can have it again. I'm sure many people are very excited and tuned in. So I just want final thoughts, just about 30 seconds. And we would just go straight into what the OECS SDM is all about, and we can end from there. So Mr. Gajadhar, you can go ahead, final thoughts. Don't forget to unmute.
Yes, we have to prepare for a new economic space that we are going to be dealing with. It's going to be much different. It's a new world for us. We were just dropped into it, and now we just have to start to swim. What's going to turn out of it is going to be much different next year, I think. I think we're still in our mode of what we used to be. But I think it's so much different coming for us that we don't even understand it. I spent some time thinking to myself, what really is to come and how do I deliver it and how do I prepare for it? But again, how quick can I move with those thoughts and how can I do it? I think we all have to come together, try to work with each other, but more importantly, and what I want to stress on is what Dr. Preville really said in his final words there, that I think agriculture for our sustainability, for food security, has a basic stuff for us, for our people, because I know we are going to go hungry soon for 2 reasons. 1, lack of food, and 2, not being able to be financially able to buy what is available. So for me, I think all emphasis needs to be put on agriculture, at least for our own consumption. Good night to everyone.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gajadhar. We'll allow you to leave now because we know you need to leave at 9. So we'll go on to the next panelist. We wish you a good night, and we hope that sometime in the future we can have a further conversation as it relates to the future of work. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And Dr. Remy, rather, final thoughts?
I don't think we disagree at all. I think first things first, food security, you can think of nothing more important for our region. And even if it's a question of how to use the technology to improve and increase yields, or we think of the backward linkages between tourism and agriculture, or we think just about our viability as nation states. I think there's no harm in thinking about traditional sectors and the importance of them. I guess my line is also that just as you have automated and transformed your business into a machine actually that can weather all of the new things that are coming at it, I think we as a society and as a country have to do the same thing. And I think we have to use technology wisely. We have to be strategic because we don't have an infinitesimal amount of resources and finances at our disposal. FDI, foreign direct investment, where we could rely on some of that skill set and technology to come in and help automate and transform our societies, is at an all-time low. So what are the areas that we need to be proactive in thinking about? And I think that is where we need to all come together, use our diaspora, use the people who are out there. And yes, I left, but I came back. There are people who want to provide some kind of assistance to their country, who have the skill set, who need to be engaged, who need to be brought into the process of thinking strategically for the future of our countries. And I don't think it's an impossible task. The truth is we don't have any other solution but to ride the wave of technology. So I think we need to be open-minded, open our eyes and our ears, and use the people at our disposal to help us navigate these choppy times without leaving anyone behind.
Thank you so much. Very, very helpful. And of course, from a trade perspective, which is my preferred perspective rather. But I really want to hear from Ms. Marius, because you're an ICT specialist. What skills, what jobs do you foresee coming in the future? There are many young people who are listening, who are very interested. What do you foresee? What do you think would be very important at this point?
Okay, in signing off, I think certainly one must have technical skills. You must be digitally literate. But as Jan had said, we are still going to need a broad range of expertise. I mean, sometimes I kind of roll my eyes when people talk about, oh, you know, everybody needs to be coding. Yes, it would be good for you to have some knowledge of coding. But if all of us were just purely coders, maybe what we produce would look like, you know, a dog's breakfast. It, you know, not aesthetically pleasing, not effective, and the like. So I think sometimes it may not necessarily be about what jobs to look for, but really to recognize that you're probably going to need to broaden the skills that you have. It cannot necessarily just be that you are an artist and just working in, you know, watercolors and acrylics, for example. But you probably need to be able to translate those kinds of skills and that aesthetic to a digital space, such that you become a little bit more marketable. And as I think both Dr. Preville and I were saying, that, you know, you need to be creative. You probably need to be a little bit more prepared to strike out on your own. One of the things that we didn't really touch about is a whole move towards the gig worker and the gig economy and what that might mean. So I think that's definitely for another conversation. But the point being, though, you know, job security isn't what it used to be, and therefore, you know, there are no guarantees about any profession at this point in time that if you do it, you know, you're set for life. It really has to be about, you have your specialist area, but you have developed skills around those, associated skills that will help you to become a lot more marketable and be able to work across disciplines, to be able to collaborate without feeling like a complete fish out of water. So I think that is probably where the emphasis ought to be. There's no magic bullet anymore. And I think if we can get out of that mindset, I think that will go a far way in helping people to look at what, you know, where they might want to put their efforts in, you know, academically and professionally in the future. On just another note, I also just want to say that coming out of Rayneau's position and the thoughts that Jana and Dr. Preville had mentioned, I think we also just need to also consider ourselves regionally. I think sometimes we can be so insular within the Caribbean that yes, we have OECS and we have CARICOM, but we think of ourselves as individual islands. And I think that there is so much more that we will be able to accomplish together than if we are just, trying to make it on our own. And to the extent that, I try to keep my fingers crossed that, at least CARICOM and I guess OECS being a strong, I think, and a much tighter unit, that we will be able to leverage the relationships that have been forged in those subgroupings to really help us to think a little bit more strategically going forward, especially with something as important as food security. I mean, Dr. Preville is saying how, St. Lucia might be able to at least produce much of the food that it consumes. But, even if for whatever reason there might be challenges and so it may take a while to get to that point, what is the trade in the region to help us all to become a little bit less reliant on, extra regional imports, I'll say it like that, as opposed to, if we were trading a lot more within the region to bolster our own food security. So that's sort of something to consider as well.
Thank you so much. At this point, we'll take a few questions. We'll take only 2 questions. I would ask James to read out the questions. I'm not sure if the questions are to any particular person, but James, I'll ask you to go ahead, and perhaps whoever can answer it best, we'll have you speak on that particular topic.
Okay, so basically, one of the questions was kind of answered by Michele just a while ago. Somebody was asking in regards to, do you think our main source of income should remain tourism, which has been discussed? Then should our young people, what should they be studying? So I think you did touch on that, Michele. Does anybody else have anything else that they would like to add with regards to what do you think young people then should be studying with regards to sustainability and getting away from tourism per se?
Perhaps I can ask Dr. Preville to assist us with that one. And Dr. Preville, also on that point, one of the things one of the questions that I indicated was the universal basic income, because in light of the digital revolution, without a doubt, we would see that there would be more people who are consultants, people working from home, people who might not necessarily be socially protected. So what are your views? What are your suggestions? And what do you think in light of that?
Okay, thanks for that. On the issue of what should the younger people be studying, I think, to my mind, there is no doubt that the services economy is where it is at. And for me, it's a combination of taking advantage of IT. You can go into IT itself if you wish, but I would view IT more as an enabler, okay? You need to know about IT sufficiently to automate your business and to ensure you can leverage the various platforms in there to render the service you wish to render abroad. So for my own business, as I said in my preamble, what has happened with COVID is that I'm now being forced to deliver more of my services virtually to my client. And so I've had to now spend time, putting stuff in the clouds, etc., to get my work done and using platforms like Zoom to deliver the work, as opposed to going there in person. I think there is going to be a need for a lot of that kind of thing to be done in other sectors. But right now I see potential in the creative industries. We have all the theater, dance, and all those performing arts. There is tremendous opportunity there. I see a lot of potential in the health and wellness sectors, especially like spa and related things to spa. There's a lot of demand for that as well. It pays very well. And these are things you can provide both here and abroad. Professional services, the standard class of that there's a huge demand there as well, and that's growing. I think there'll always be demand in that area, and people should consider that very seriously as well. On the issue of the universal basic income, this one, I have a very non-conventional kind of view on this, more kind of an economist view, because you see, I read up on Young, I think it was Andrew Young, who was running for US president on the, in the primaries, and he was all for this universal basic income. My view is this: the way an economy really works is that you have to produce before you can consume. You have to give before you receive, literally, okay? So I am not really for, I'm not a proponent for universal basic income, because the thing is, the first problem you have is that someone has to pay for this. Who's gonna pay for this? When Young was asked about how he's gonna give every American $1,000 a month, it came down to he would have to get some kind of a VAT, a VAT type tax of about 10%, right, to be able to bring this into reality. And that's in a large economy like America, how many $1 trillion a year? So I think for us to make such a move in the OECS, it would mean more taxation for sure. But you're going to put more taxation when you are shrinking the pie, okay? Because what the VAT does actually, it makes the pie shrink. So I would prefer to see we focus more on upskilling. I think we need to get people who are not at that point yet, to get them to learn more, to become more valuable, to be able to add more value to society, and less focus on, you know, a universal basic income, which is something that I think, you know, you run into a lot of problems implementing it. It sounds good. Switzerland is the only country so far that's actually tried to do it. And so far, there's not much positive pushback in that area. So that's my take.
Okay, thank you so much. I would now ask James whether there are any questions. James, are there any questions?
Yeah, we have another question on the Facebook platform.
Okay.
Asking, given how slow governments and Ministry of Education are to reviewing and or changing curricula, what role do institutions like the Chamber of Commerce play in helping reorientate students thinking for the market workplace?
Wow. Would Miss Marius, would you like to answer that, or Dr. Remy? Okay, yes, Miss Marius, you can go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, you can take a stab at it, Michele, and I'll go after you.
Okay. Well, I think certainly there is scope for not necessarily just the Chamber of Commerce, but I think even, you know, other entities, even probably schools, like for example, when they are organizing like career days and so on, and even, you know, at the university as well, where you have career guidance, where you can have the perspective of the employers to at least help students to recognize that there may be skills that they need to develop, additional skills outside of just the pure academics. Within the Ministry of Education, but I guess it has to be driven by policy. The curriculum might not necessarily change as quickly as we would like, but maybe things like, you know, debate clubs and just even the focus on extracurricular can help, because I think sometimes, especially in the Caribbean, where we are so focused on academic performance, that you find that increasingly students are not being as involved in extracurricular activity. And maybe it's only when they get to university and part of the admissions processes that they need to, you know, tell of other things that they're doing outside the school, that they're then scrambling to try to figure out, you know, the piano class that they took for a year to be trying to figure out how to get that captured in their applications. And so I think though that there may be a lot of things that we can do within the society to help to highlight the fact that the workplace is changing, and also to help our children to develop additional skills outside of just being, well, I want to say being bright, but I'm not even sure if that is what is often happening, or just the fact that they have become sufficiently well trained to pass the exam. So I think that at least may be ways to begin to offset some of what we are seeing, whereby the education system itself may not be as responsive or as agile to accommodate where the workplace is going. I guess having said that, and let me at least not bash the education system, there's a lot of fundamentals that we need to learn at school. And that is what at least I think, certainly up until, I guess, grade 11, that we're doing. Whether or not now that technology is becoming more commonplace in the classroom and therefore being able to leverage it, you might be able to, I guess, speed up some of the things that we are learning. What I may have learned at grade 6, probably now grade 3 students are learning that because education has come in, we are more knowledgeable, they're more exposed at a younger age to just information. So I think that we're going to see the changes, but I think until such time that the education system catches up, the business community, but I think also, extracurricular can help us develop some of the skills that the workplace is looking for.
Thank you so much, Michele. There's one more question that I have, that is from Ms. Yvonne Agard, who's the director of the St. Lucia Coalition of Services. And she was also very instrumental in this Zoom call, because she in fact suggested most of you here today. So I think that it is my duty to ensure that I ask that particular question. And it's in line with what I indicated earlier for Genevieve. Her question is, how are these new work trends, how are they going to affect men and women, same or differently? And in terms of the opportunities, what is your view on the gender perspective? I would leave that for Dr. Remy. 1 minute, please, sorry.
Yes, no, I'll keep it short. I think one of the things that is patently clear is that we don't have disaggregated or even aggregated data on a lot of these phenomena we're talking about. We're extrapolating from international scenarios and trying to read trends in a domestic context, even trying to a regional context, even trying to understand how many of our professionals are utilizing ICT, or how many, what percentage of the workplace are the value added is accounted for by ICT. And the same kind of issue will arise when you think about the gendered impacts of technology. But I think if we are to extrapolate from what's happening, I think the understanding is that on the one hand, there'll be more opportunities for women because, women in the workplace, women are traditionally caregivers, and so they expend a lot of their time taking care of the young and old. And now they may just have more opportunities online to both access opportunities, sell their produce as well, to the extent that they're involved, or they can utilize electronic commerce platforms. But also, I think, harassment in the workplace is something that may be attenuated to some extent if you can stay at home and apply your services that way. But we're seeing more and more trends about online harassment and bullying. So even in that protected area, government needs to step in as well to ensure that there's not a gendered ignorance in terms of the disproportionate impact that some of these policies may have. And I think, I guess the call is for, on the one hand, making these opportunities that are traditionally denied women because they spend so much of their time towards caring and giving back to society that way, but giving them these opportunities to utilize these platforms more and more online is probably a positive of it, but also being aware that at the end of the day, women still stand to benefit most, I think, from these technologies, but they still can be caught up in the traditional things that divide women and men's progress if we're not very attentive to the way that technology can impact women very, very differently. And also, just finally, encouraging young girls to engage in the STEM education. So, encouraging our young girls to do things like science and technology and engineering. You'd be surprised to learn that there's still a bias against that for younger women. Although we're seeing a lot more enrollment in these sectors and these disciplines, it's still something that a lot of our women don't think it's the area or the area that they will be welcomed into. So I think, at different levels, it impacts women in different ways. And I think the room is for us to study these impacts in more integrated and more dedicated ways.
Thank you so much, Dr. Remy. And I would just like to say thank you so much to our speakers. Thank you to our participants. Thank you to James, who has been very instrumental in the whole social media, getting it across different platforms. I would also like to thank Miss Yvonne Agard, who has definitely assisted us in ensuring that I place together the correct, the right set of speakers rather. And now we would just like to ensure that everybody understands what umbrella this is falling under. This is under the OECS, the Organization of the Eastern Caribbean States, Sustainable Development Movement. And there's a summit which is coming up in September, the 23rd and 24th. And I would ask James to take it away and just inform everybody what the summit is all about. It would be a similar discussion to what we're having now, but definitely more intense, more interesting, preparing us for the future work. James, on to you.
Yeah, again, also just, I see there's a few more questions that have popped up, so feel free, guys. We're gonna be emailing you afterwards, and we'll try our best to maybe get some of the answers to some of your questions to the panel, so that this isn't the end. This is we're not gonna stop there. We're still gonna have more discussions after this. Okay, so this is really just the first of a few discussions. With regards to the OECS SDM, what I want to do is just play a video. It's just 1 minute, so that you can just get a gist of what this SDM Summit 2020 is all about. Okay.
I don't think we're hearing. We're not hearing, James.
Okay, guys, so this is just a brief video that, again, we're going to be sharing with you via email as well, all the participants as well. I'm sure there's some names that you're familiar with: Les Brown, Daymond, John the Shark, as he's known. So it's a movement. We don't want to just be a situation where it's a summit, everybody's excited, there's a few big names, and it's all over social media. It really needs to be the beginning of a movement about sustainable development. And we're hoping that just with each of us as ambassadors, we've been having these webinars to just get different perspectives, have conversations. So we've done this tonight. There was one last week. There's also one tomorrow with our SDM ambassadors in Anguilla with regards to entrepreneurship. I think it's about in the entertainment industry. So again, different perspectives from around the region, and it's gonna all be that climax, as it were, at the end of September, the SDM 2020. So what we're gonna be doing is afterwards, we're gonna email you the video, also the links if you wanna get tickets to the event as well, all right? So again, it's not the end. We don't want it to just be a case of just all talk. We need to make sure that there's action that follows, and that's what we're really trying to push right now.
Thank you so much, James. And this is just the beginning. So final words, one sentence from each of our speakers, and we will call it a night. Thank you so much. So I would start with Dr. Preville. Don't forget to unmute.
Yes, I must remember to unmute my mic. Okay, well, I have to say thanks so much for my involvement in this and for inviting me to take part. It's been very informative for me as well. I have a closing comment on the workplace because that's something I think you raised. And for me, the workplace of the future will be less of a physical location and of course more of I see a coordination of human and technological resources that bring solutions to our problems, right? And even the concept of an employee is going to change a lot. Employees will become less loyal to a firm and more loyal to their skill set and what they can offer in the market. More contracting, less full-time employment. Of course, we already know that. And that brings into question the role of trade unions in the future. They will not be like what we have today, because they will not have this grouping of individuals that they go and represent before somebody. It's going to be a different setup altogether where people will be basically freelancers, more a world of freelancers than what we've had so far. That's my comment on the future of work.
Thank you so much,
Thank you
Dr.
so much.
Remy. Thank you, Dr. Remy.
Yes, and thank you again for the opportunity to be here on a topic that's going to impact us all. And I think, you know, strangely enough, to echo something that, or a sentiment that was expressed by Mr. Gajadhar, I think everything that Claudius said is apt and is relevant. But we're talking about a small subset of the population. We're talking about people who have skills that can be upskilled, and ultimately people who can participate much more fully in the new economy. But at the same time, we need to not leave others behind. And I want to see a future of work that is inclusive, that lets people feel that they're part of the new economy. And I think government policy, private sector involvement, stakeholders from trade unions, as you said, to business chambers, to private sector, to the academic community, need to all be part of the solution for everyone to rise on the same technological tide. And I think we need to have an integrated way of thinking about the future of work, that everyone, no child, no worker is left behind.
Thank you so much, Dr. Remy. And last but not least, Ms. Michele Marius, final thoughts as an ICT consultant.
Okay, I think one of the things that is really weighing on me is the fact, and it's probably not so much, well, there's a technical component to it, but I think more importantly is the fact that we have been, I think with COVID-19 in particular, we have become panicked about the future. And I think what we really need to do is to become a little bit more strategic and plan. You know, there is a lot of resources there, you know, in terms of just, you know, human capital as well as intellectual, you know, capabilities within the region to help us to figure out how best to leverage technology, because I think that is critical. It's an important driver, an essential driver of how, not necessarily just the future of work, but how our societies will operate. And I think we need to be a lot more strategic about how we are planning our future, and not necessarily just having some sort of reaction to wanting to, you know, to restore the status quo. So I think especially with this whole sustainable development movement, I think that we really need to be thinking about it a lot more cogently and strategically moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. I can't say how thankful I am. James, honestly, you've been amazing. James is my fellow ambassador, and we decided to do it together because of our different skill sets. And we just wanted to say thank you, and I would leave the final thoughts to James, and we will call it a night. Actually, 2 full hours of speaking, in fact, rather than 1, but I'm more than grateful. Thank you, everyone. Go ahead, James.
Yeah, absolutely. Huge thanks to you all. Thank you to Alberta. You made it so easy. Yeah, just your knowledge going into this and being able to moderate this and helping, you know, get all of these persons together. It was really wonderful and enlightening. Just from the reaction online as well, I mean, people are really interested in this topic. So we really do look forward to, you know, our next discussion in whatever format it may take. So once again, thank you to each and every one of you. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Mr. Rayneau as well has gone. It was nice to hear two different perspectives to the side, especially with regard to the technology. So once again, thank you all, and we shall be in touch. See you at SDM 2020. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.